Hello, everyone, and welcome. In this recording, I would like to compact three big subjects that are going to take the spotlight of, astrologically speaking, at least, in all of August. And because of the timing and also because of certain aspects, these three celestial conversations, these three major energies will play out simultaneously, and they do have something to do with one another as well. So I think the best way to analyze it is to somehow compact them into one video, again, because they're interlinked, interconnected. It makes it easier to follow the energy and the pattern, and of course the meaning of it. And this video, I really want to focus on guidance more than anything, because we are gonna need a lot of that. So in this first part of the video, I would like to speak about the upcoming Mercury retrograde period, which is just around the corner. It starts on the 4th of August and it lasts until the 28th of August, but Mercury will only leave its shadow path, so start covering new ground around the 12th of September. Now, this first of all, a few big ideas, big lines about this present Mercury retrograde. As you can see, Mercury retrograde begins in the sign of Virgo. So Mercury made his way to 4 degrees of Virgo. Here, especially on the 4th, it's standing still in the sky, not moving much, and preparing to go backwards. Of course, not in physical reality. In physical reality, no planet ever goes backwards. It doesn't change its orbit, so to speak. Under Mercury retrograde, Mercury will travel all the way back to 21 degrees of Leo. So the theme is immediately set. We know that something begins in Virgo. So Virgo type of themes in our lives. And we must also take into consideration that Mercury is it's most powerful, most comfortable in the sign of Virgo. So it is really, really meant to solve certain things. But as you can see, it may start out in Virgo, but the true, let's say, processing, reimagining, rethinking, all the words connected to a typical Mercury retrograde period, well, those are in the heart of Leo, Leo being also the heart. And while retrograde in the sign of Leo, Mercury also holds a cazimi, so a conjunction with the sun, going into the heart of the sun to be reborn, symbolically speaking. So that's a very, very powerful Mercury moment in any given context. That is clarity, that is combustion, that is where something really, really is highlighted for not just the mind, Mercury, but the heart, Leo, how we feel, what we feel, our inner heart-based truth, and our emotional intelligence. What does that say about whatever issues, topic, themes, relationship conversations Mercury retrograde brought up from the past? But we must keep in mind that even though it's a lot of heart energy, asking the heart, what do you feel? What do you want? And it's not just a period of consultation. For Mercury retrograde in Leo is a really, really strong creative energy. Anything that has to do with improvising, anything that has to do with passion-based activities. They may be strictly mental creativity, to come up with the right idea that doesn't just solve the situation, in a strictly mercurial Virgo sense, as in the practicality of it, but it also has to give passion or the effect, joy, or Leo, the bit of Leo and heart or youth or child in it. You know what I mean? So this is where Mercury's job is really cut out for him, because the solution of Virgo, yes, the practicality, but it also needs to have the emotional or the heart type of impact on the situation, whatever it is for each and every person. But of course, Virgo can also be a medical energy, our daily routines, our sacrifices, our service, our how we are organizing our lives, our work life especially, but also time for our health, for our physical needs. All of that is Virgo. So changes there, going back to the drawing board there, or anything that we are called to evaluate based not just on the logic, but also the logic of the heart. You know what I mean? So this Mercury retrograde favors all of these things. Uh, I cannot deny that I very, very strongly suspect that this Mercury retrograde will also very deeply, stir up energies within relationships, because Leo is all about, the heart energy, sensuality. So this Mercury retrograde is also going to stir up topics about, especially in couples, about sensual stuff, passions, etc. Children. Do we want children? When do we want children? Children. Because Leo and Mercury is the planning of it or discussing it, the dialogue of it. And Leo, of course, consulting which what every partner feels. So there is that side of it. But then there is even friendship, even anything where there is genuine, a bit of love or a bit of, something heart connected. There will be discussions. There will be, of course, not just discussions, because one of the ways Mercury retrograde can play out, alliances, that you have this very skilled friend, but you never ever collaborated. There it is, the time is here because of the need, or, so this has a lot of good in it as well. A lot of constructive energy, playful energy, improvisation, alternative, or where, let me depict a harder uh, feeling of the situation, where you're in some kind of turmoil or trouble or deadline, or there is some kind of unexpected chaotic moment in your life. Why? Well, Mercury retrograde will hold a second and also a third time a square with Uranus. The first time of the square was when Mercury was in shadow but not yet retrograde. Now we'll have a second and a third time. So what does that mean? Unexpected, or the situation is urgent, because Saturn, sorry, not Saturn, Uranus. Well, Uranus is not just the chaos of things, but Uranus is also that big, objective, down to earth truth, a situation of which awareness we cannot ignore. Because Uranus is also, when there is like a faulty equipment or something is malfunctioning, that will repeat until it is clear that it's not usable. That's also Uranus. If something is broken, well, it will keep on bringing it to our awareness. So don't just understand it in a practical, proper sense, although Mercury retrograde is good for breaking equipment, electronics, phone, internet, laptop, devices, even our flesh and blood brain device, where sometimes Mercury retrograde is those moments when our mouth says it. For example, when someone spills a secret totally unwillingly on autopilot, and there it is, it came out. It just came out. You know what I mean? So Mercury retrograde is also when the mind is so distracted that it doesn't have a valid communication with the unconscious. So sometimes the unconscious spills out. There's that type of energy as well. But what I wanted to say, it also breaks that. It also, yes, breaks down, but it also raises the awareness for everything that is not necessarily a physical breakdown or an error or something that is not right. It is also in energy. It is also in value. It is also in relationships. It is also in feelings. Because on one hand, Uranus the higher octave of Mercury is in the Earth sign of Taurus. Mercury, a good chunk of Venus is the ruler of Taurus. So Venus, a good chunk of this Mercury retrograde period will be in Virgo. So she will be heavily under the influence of Mercury. And this is where we evaluate the value of everything. Because Venus in the sign of Virgo is the more down to earth, facts, figures, numbers kind of Venus, where she appreciates the quantity, not necessarily just the promise of it, not just necessarily the a gesture of generosity, but it needs to happen in a physical way. A very, very non romantic, but down to earth, rational, earthly Venus. So, put this in a Mercury retrograde context. That which is an obstacle, a blockage, it just disturbs us, Venus and Virgo. When something disturbs a Virgo Venus, well, she gets really irritated and she wants to solve the situation as best as she can. So, for example, a faulty equipment let's say it's in a factory. Well, after a while, someone really has to do something about it, or else, and we don't want to get to the or else. So, Mercury retrograde with a square with Uranus, it will force you to solve situations either that are new, unexpected, or especially situations that you know that something is not right in your life. May it be a physical equipment, a way of thinking, a relationship, a job, a connection, a value in your life, money, something is there. It doesn't matter if it's inner or outer, because on one hand, Taurus, yes, is earthly, but Taurus is also inner, because for real happiness, that happiness has to be felt on a higher level as well. You know what I mean? So it will kind of ask you to be aware and try and fix it, or your specifics. And you might find yourself that the conventional, the usual, the quickest, easiest solution for any reason is not available, not accessible. For example, a Venusian type of expression, too expensive, or not available to you for any reason. A Virgo is discrimination. And I don't mean the bad kind of, racist and stuff like that discrimination, but discrimination as just a term where we label something and we are aware of what it is. And if we don't want it in a certain way, we discriminate it. You know what I mean? So this is where, let me give you the most easiest example. You have like I don't know, a kilo of tomatoes or any type of vegetable or fruit or whatever you want. Well, there are gonna be some not so fresh or even rotten, or let's just say not so fresh pieces amongst the many fresh ones. If a recipe requires fresh ones, where you're gonna discriminate the not so fresh ones and probably use them for something else. It is not. So this is the example where discrimination is positive, where we need to select, we need to discern, we need to, in a, again, not negative way, judge which tomato is fresh and which isn't. And we judge it by proper mercurial knowledge, our senses, and you know what I mean. So what I said, this discrimination energy is going to be part one way or another, because sometimes this energy will ask us what is not valuable in your life. For example, what is eating your time way too much, eating your energy, eating something, consuming. Why do I say eating? Virgo digestive tract. Then eliminate it, do something with it. And for example, time spent on social media, time spent in a computer game, time spent with certain friends, time spent at a bar, I can give you so many examples. This energy, do something with it. Change now. Speaking about change, another key moment of Mercury retrograde is one before it went retrograde, when it was at around 0 degrees of Virgo. It held a quincunx with Saturn, Pluto, elimination. Then it will rehold that quincunx, but at 29 degree of Leo, because Pluto will be at 29 degree of Capricorn already. A powerful retrograde energy. That second quincunx will come with proper answers. As in, the first quincunx, I have to change things around. I need to, even, I don't know how yet, the quincunx. We can't figure it out. But I know it will come to it. I just know the realization of it. The second quincunx, and I'll get to these dates in just a little bit. The second quincunx is where, yep, this may not be the ideal solution. It may not be the conventional solution, how everyone does it or what is recommended. It is just something I improvised or thought about, brainstormed, heard from XYZ. But this is what I have to work with. Let's try it and see what happens. And apply this to anything. May it be a relationship, a job, your electronics, anything you want to purchase, invest in. Why? Many times when we make the decision that it's worth it, Venus, okay, we understand Venus, but it's also a bit of Leo, because the heart wants it. You know what I mean? And that adds to Venus. Because when the heart wants something, Venus knows it will lead to pleasure. So it will be her joy ultimately. So you see, playing with values. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? What do I do? How do I do it? And again, Uranus is improvisation. Quincunx aspect is improvisation. Mercury in Virgo, when it really can't apply anything safe, sound, logical, then it will use its own logic. The gut, improvisation. And Leo, the sign of creativity, it's improvisation, but from a, let's say, energetic or inner perspective. So, yes. Now, after this, all of this was said, so you know the general. Not really good for to sign contracts, to promise important things. Not really good to rely upon fixed dates when traveling. What every retrograde asks from us is to try and go with the flow, surrender when it's out of control, try to stay calm, try to look at the situation from a neutral perspective. So this, of course, applies to every Mercury retrograde. Mercury is communication amongst many other things. So in Leo, the dark side can be something too selfish, too egocentric, too aggressive, too angry, too passionate. Remember, Mercury squaring Uranus, always, it doesn't matter which sign they're in, words can go differently, or don't get offended. Watch what you try to think before you say something. And not good time to buy brand new ultra modern equipment, car, you know what I mean. Also, not a very good time, if it's not fated, for surgery, especially when Mercury is in Virgo. When it's fated, then it's fated. The retrograde is part of the fate. So it's not up to us, not a choice. And the same with contracts or big purchases. If it was already set in stone before the retrograde, for example, like a pre-contract, a promise of selling, buying, well, then that's that. So yes. Now let's look very briefly, quickly at the big dates. And there's a lot of them, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time with this because we need to get to the Saturn Jupiter conjunction. What does this have to do with Mercury retrograde? Well, Mercury will be retrograde at this time, and Jupiter Mars being in Mercury's home sign of Gemini. So Mercury is one of the executory of this energy and also one of the recipients of the chaos or the hardship. Um, the 4th of August is when Mercury is standing still in the sky, preparing to go retrograde. I'm not sure why it doesn't say it on my screen. Here it is. As you see that little S, that means that Mercury is starting to stand still. So moving on, the oh, and one important thing. Mercury starts its retrograde because whenever we look at any retrograde of any planet, the conditions in which it starts, it's first of all stopping and then going backwards, that kind of usually says the story in a nutshell of the retrograde, what it's about. Uh, Personally speaking, you have to put it in the context of your chart. Only then can you understand what it's about. But generally, what do we have in the sky? Well, on one hand, Mercury trines an trans-Neptunian object in the sign of Capricorn at 4 degrees of Capricorn, of course, named Ixion. Now, this will be definitely felt on the world stage, sorry. Why do I say that? Because on the 4th of August, Uranus is still on Algol, the malevolent fixed star, the head of big leaders, and we saw in chains how Mars and Uranus conjunct Algol. Mars left Gemini. Sorry. Mars left Taurus to Gemini, but Uranus didn't. Uranus still is hanging on Algol, hanging around. So Algol's symbolism, story, expression is very much ongoing. And we saw with some of the, first of all, indirectly in a non-physical way, every leader or head of state or big organization or big something was under some kind of pressure. For example, Venezuela is something that just came to my mind right now. The obvious, President Trump's assassination, Joe Biden stepping down, then Hamas leader that Ismail Haniel, or how he called, killed just recently, assassination. But then there isn't just, the obvious stepping down and assassination. It's also rising, but we don't see the rise yet. But that's going on in the background. So every type of leader is going through something. Like, let me give you the most ridiculous example. Many times, fathers, especially in those countries, not no, not country, parts of the world where the culture is permissive of this. A family is considered to be led by a father, right? So in very many places, especially in these cultures, why does it, the culture, what you believe is what the universe gives you, right? So in those places where the father is considered to be the leader of the family, you see a lot of turmoil. Of course, a small personal one. Washing machine breaks down, it's up to that to fix it, but how he fixes it is an adventure in itself. Or health problems. Very many males who are fathers at the same time experience certain health problems. And that's very Uranian, because many times a sudden health problem is just a reminder that you are alive, life is precious, time is precious, appreciate everything that you have, and of course, the family. Don't take your husband, father, etc. for granted, because so sometimes these Uranian moments, as scary as they seem when they happen, that breaks his leg, or they are actually a loving reminder that unity matters so much. Because what Uranus wants to highlight is the love. Not the opposite, it's the love. But you get what I'm saying. So the leaders are under pressure, but on the other hand, Ixion, because this is where I'm going, Capricorn being the father, Capricorn being the leader as well. Ixion is a rather not so nice player, where he was exiled and punished severely by Zeus. He was a king because he just couldn't contain his urges, and he broke the divine laws in every way, shape, and form. But at the same time, Ixion's positive example is when a law, a rule, something that is basically forced upon you, is corrupted, ridiculous, evil in itself, then it's your duty to rebel against it. Mercury, trine, and Mercury as communication, etc., etc. Virgo, where we label things, where we judge things. Again, this type of judgment can be good or bad. What do I say good? As in, just be aware of what things are and not live in ignorance and deception. But the bad type of judgment can also be part of this, Ixion, where you kind of judge in a bad way. Not just become aware, but also start judging, casting your opinions in a. So I know it's a trine, but we must make sure it doesn't get to the not so nice side of it. So we will see big revolts against law or big breakings of international law on the world stage, and Mercury is going to speak about it, and Virgo analyze it in an overwhelming way, where we will be even afraid to turn on TV, phone, internet, when the news of what is happening is going to just swarm us, flood us, overwhelm us. And this may also be something in the medical world. Okay, now let's move ahead. On the 6th, we see Mercury conjunct the moon. So this is when the Mercury retrograde sinks in. So on the 6th, we are already in the Mercury retrograde vibes. Then moving on to the 8th, Mercury conjunct Venus. Remember the value when it sinks in, whatever that means. Do I love it or not? The money, is it worth it or not? Or my time, my energy, value. Sorry, Venus and Virgo, the practical value of it. You know what I'm not. For example, Venus is here in Virgo, she is considered to be a bit debilitated. Why? Because she is exalted in Pisces. In Pisces, she doesn't care about the earthly, she cares about the feeling, the spirit, the principle, the ideal, the dream. Here in Virgo, the opposite. It has to be the real deal. So financially speaking, this is gonna be an important day when, and look, 8th of Lionsgate, right? Financially or in love or whatever, but in an earthly way, is it worth it or is it not? Do I stay with him? Do I not? Or is this professional Virgo service, right? Actually the right for me, or is his notoriety a bit artificial? Or you know what I mean. It can play out in so very many different ways. Moving on to the 14th, then here we have the Mercury quincunx Pluto. But this is where they are at 0 degree of their signs. Pluto, Aquarius, Mercury, Virgo. So this is the moment when the quincunx, I can't solve the situation, or what do I do? Nothing conventional is right now available to me. Or bad news. But bad news, Pluto, coming either from friends or collectively speaking, we imagine so easily what the bad news can be, because that's ongoing, right? Moving on the 15th, finally, Mercury re-enters Leo, and it's going to be at 29 degree of Leo. This in itself is already heavy news. And quincunx Neptune, something that will stir compassion, or we must be careful, because this quincunx also says a lot of what is meant to scare us, alert us, shock our hearts, Leo, right? May be a bit BS or not so true or wrapped in different colorings. Because the truth is what's in the wrapping. They might wrap it in 10 million sheets of wrapping for us not to be able to get to them. So there's going to be news, and Mercury conjunct Regulus, again, leaders, etc., etc., etc. You know what I mean. A Jupiter conjunct Mars. But I'm not going to mention it right now. I'm going to speak about it at the very end of this recording. That's going to be the last thing I'm going to speak of. But anyway, Mars conjunct Jupiter, Jupiter the law, or Jupiter a decision, a choice, a ruling, court ruling, countries, or some people have to make big decisions. There it is. Mars expanded. Mars is the conflict. Also, the Olympic Games. Why? Well, Mars in Gemini, a physical activity, sport event that everyone's talking about. Mars is the sport, Gemini, everyone's watching and talking about it. Then at the same time, the period Sun in Leo is usually also a time when things get physical in a playful way, competition way. But all of these just points to the Olympic Games. Something that is weird, Quincunx Neptune, hits the news again. A lot already hit the news at the first quincunx when Mercury was at 29 degree of Leo, but still moving forward. Yes, the opening ceremony hit the news in so very many different ways. Some of it was really nice, a nice symbol. The other was something so controversial that, yeah, what was like, I just want to say, what were they thinking? I'm not saying what the symbol itself, but everyone knows when you do stuff like that, everyone's going to talk about it. And the opinions are going to be dual and very, very heated. But that's Uranus, liberty. And Pluto in Aquarius. What we do with liberty. Sometimes it doesn't matter. We do it just for the sheer sake that it's free and we can. Okay, so moving on the 18th, sorry, on the 18th, we have the second square with Uranus. So, and not just a square with Uranus, Mercury is also conjunct the Sun. So the Sun himself is gonna, as Mercury leaves the square, the Sun will perfect the square. So I would like to take this energy in one, as in Mercury and the Sun. Whatever Mercury retrograde theme is playing out in our lives, it's heated. It's under the spotlight. It's spoken about the communication or the brainstorming, or this is when we come up with the alternative solution. This is when we improvise. This is when the energy shapes itself. A touch of chaos, but that chaos is big awareness, a truth, Uranus. Sun gives its power, its combustion to Mercury. We see it for what it is. We try to process it, and you know by now where I'm. But remember, when traveling or equipment, this is where it will really go random and chaotic and breakdowns. And but at the same time, this is also where synchronicities happen. The shock factor is that you met him or her after 40 years, 20 years, put it in your context. But you did meet him. So, yeah, it's action time. A day after, as I said, the conjunction, the Kazimi. So Mercury processes something, or receives a promise, or is in the process of really figuring something out. And of course, that something is part of its retrograde theme, because the square with Uranus is still on, very, very much on. So the Uranian impulse is definitely there. And again, we must not forget the Mars and Jupiter conjunction ongoing. Why is this important? Because Mercury is the executor of this energy, because it is the ruler of Gemini. Just think about media. Uh, Mass media, social media, anything media is gonna be on fire, literally. And and regardless of why, Mars is also the war, the conflict in the Middle East, but Mars is also the Olympic Games, but Mars is also anything an artist, someone launches, and it's big. So Mars is action. And Gemini, well, Gemini is especially communication, people, connecting people. This is also a massive persuasive energy, as in Jupiter. Again, we know law, or Jupiter higher knowledge in the academic world, big scientific debates, and there you go, debate, or law, contradictory information, but of the highest philosophical, legal level being debated. So things informationally are going to be definitely on fire, and media coverage of all of this. Then we go to the 24th. On the 24th, we have Mercury sextiling Mars. And Mars being in Mercury's home sign of Gemini, and Mercury being in Mars's exalted sign of Leo. But remember that Mercury was conjunct the Sun in his home sign of Leo. So the Sun already charged up Mercury, blessed energy. Because blessed Mercury with its energy, that's what I wanted to say. Why? Because Mercury is like a guest in the Sun's home. So, of course, you treat your guest well. And the sextile is a really, this is one of the best displays of the Mercury retrograde period, because on one hand, in an imperfect way, Jupiter is also part of this sextile. Jupiter gives the expansion and the promise, optimism, the Gemini, the best of the Gemini, and then Mars executes. Mercury figures it out, gets communication. Things are being worked. So this is really good for action. And again, persuasive energy, good for convincing anyone of anything in any way. Convincing partner, convincing your crush, convincing that the job interview, because Mercury retrograde may not be a best time to sign a contract, but if you have a job and you want to change it, and you applied for another job, to go experiment and go on job interviews, because chances are the contract is going to be signed after August. That's good. Going and experimenting, trying things out, talking about it, potentially negotiating, playing with ideas, anticipating is a really, really good idea. So, yeah. Then we go to the 28th, when Mercury stands still in the sky and prepares to go direct back on its shadow path. So this would be the official end of the Mercury retrograde season. So again, Mercury had a lot to figure out. It still holds the sextile with Jupiter. So Jupiter is there to help. Jupiter is everything that went on the Mercury retrograde season. The wisdom of that Jupiter is now really helping. It is whatever we brainstorm, figure it out, improvise. Now we are seeing the effects of that. Moving forward around the 7th of September, this is now we are in September. Final square, third and final square between Mercury and Uranus. Maybe a final touch of improvisation, or where your improvisation got you. Because this is the third square. This is the conclusive one. This is where you're already mastering the energy. This is where you're getting the determination and motivation and the energy to work with the big wisdom, big lessons, or whatever it is that you needed to do with the Mercury retrograde energy. And then we go to the 9th of September, again 9-9. That's numerologically quite synchronistic. You cannot see it on my screen because I moved a few hours ahead, but on this day Mercury is at 29 degree of Leo, so it holds a quincunx with Pluto at 29 degree of Capricorn already on the 9th of September. So this is big. Why? Remember the situation that came at the first quincunx on the 14th of August. Now this quincunx is different. It is based on that, but what we think and what has power over us, what we've done with the first quincunx, I want to say, that's where it gives us a different power, a different option. We see things in a totally different way. And non-personally speaking, what happens on the world stage? Because 29 degree of Leo, again, Regulus, the big people, but then 29 degree of Capricorn, um, that's top-down authority. That's the structure. That's really the world of politics and big business and big everything. So something is taking place there without a shadow of a doubt. Then another date is 12th of September, when Mercury already left 4 degrees of Virgo, moved on to 5. So Mercury is covering new ground. So that would be really the end of Mercury retrograde. Now I would like to set my screen on the 19th of August, because this is uh, one of the key dates of the Jupiter and Saturn square. Another date, another square, because remember, Saturn is retrograde and Jupiter has yet to go retrograde this year. Will be in December, so I'm not going to mention. That's a bit different. I'm just going to speak about this 19th of August. Now, the square between Jupiter and Saturn is very important because this is the first astrological moment in a big way, in a relevant way, which adds something, which continues the story, which is the next milestone karmically to whatever the meeting of Jupiter, the same Jupiter and Saturn, and 21 December 2020, the great conjunction at 0 degrees of Aquarius. Something started then, something opened within us, a new paradigm, even personally, a new worldview, new life philosophy, new way of thinking, new spiritual, philosophical, or any type of journey. Something, a new dream, a new desire, a new self-image where, oh my goodness, I don't see myself as I used to a few years ago or all my life, especially my future. I see my life so differently now. My life setup, who I am, what I'm doing. I am stepping into what I see now because that is my truth. This is what should have happened in a big way from 2020 onwards, December 2020 onwards. But again, the philosophy of our energy. And this philosophy might or might have not played out in a very concrete way. But what changed profoundly in your life from 2020? And here I don't necessarily mean like like Plutonian changes, the loss of this or, but rather moments when your own understanding expanded, a faith, a way of looking at the world, life, or in any way, shape, and form simply ended, faded away, and a new one started emerging. In this sense, I mean, because whatever that represented now is the first milestone and stepping into our future, a new future that the 2020 Great Conjunction kind of invited us to envisage for ourselves. And the old one was the sacrifice. The old one was the a lamb or whatever on the altar in the sacrificial flame that we give to the divine. So an old part of ourselves was dying, is dying. And Pluto, at that degree, well, how should I say? That's where it really highlights what I said. That something was sacrificed, but something else took its place. So this square, on one hand, is a reminder of just that, what we left behind, and what is asking us to be parent to it, being born. How are we stepping into our future? This is the big philosophy, the big way of looking at this square. Because Saturn in Pisces, it asks you to distill the past, to keep everything that is pure wisdom and aligned to the morality of your being, and to discard, dissolve, even with acid, like acid dissolves limescale, that which you deem that it's no longer part of your soul journey. Feelings. So this is feelings, emotions, and energies. This is where Saturn, the humor of Saturn is rigid, the end, dry, cold, rigid. So it's the end of everything. Okay, you might say Pluto. Yes, but let's understand it in ancient Hellenistic astrology way where there wasn't Pluto. Saturn was the end. The, it was the last planet, the edge of our known world and universe. Everything that lied beyond Saturn was either the realm of the abyss or the realm of the high divine. Mystery, inaccessible, unknown by man. But then Uranus changed that for us in both in a practical way, but also the alchemy. But anyway, so Saturn, we are the controllers right now of what it is within ourselves that we keep and what it is that we release with this acid, with this almost vitriol. And Saturn, we must not forget, is not alone in Pisces. The ruler of Pisces, Neptune, is at 29 degree, very, very powerful. Hence the acid and vitriol example I used. And both these planets in 2025, they will meet, conjoin in Aries, and then in 2026 enter Aries for good. So again, Saturn is not alone there. So this is why it's very, very powerful. Very, very powerful in a spiritual, psychological sense, because this brings us back to purity. But then there's Jupiter in Gemini. Gemini is the down to earth practical, where, Gemini is like a gate. Like even the glyph looks like a gate, right? Like two columns supporting a black, or how you say. So that's like a gate. When the divine enters the earthly, well, it kind of has to take on a form which the earthly can accept, work with, etc., etc. So Jupiter will ask of Saturn to exactly select your values, select that which you, the greatest wisdom of your journey so far, but don't keep it in principle, make it applicable, allow, make sure that you can embody it, right? So reach the right balance. Neither is too earthly good, because it spoils the value, the sacredness, the purity of whatever it is that you find within yourself or whatever you want to heal. In order to heal a trauma, you need to see the value of the healed state, because sometimes healing means forgiving the unforgivable. Because if we forgive, we can release. It no longer holds weight. But in order for us to be able to forgive, we need to have that strength and motivation. And Jupiter is the earthly, the applicable. It needs to actually be able to work in your life, be part of who you are in an embodied, active way. So, yeah, this is the philosophy of it, right? Now, it's not just the Saturn and Jupiter square. It is actually a T square, or if you necessarily want to complicate things, it's even a grand cross, a mutable T square or grand cross. Why? Venus is at 17 degree of Virgo, which means it squares Jupiter and Saturn at the same. It opposes Saturn. It squares Jupiter along with Saturn. That's what I wanted to say. Well, Mars is at 19 degrees of Gemini, so still a pretty active power player in this T square. Now let's keep it at this for the moment. Let's not complicate it. Venus and Virgo, the value. Or, again, I said this energy wants to make something practical. It wants to either lead to a big truth, a big choice, a big decision, a big um energy that we want to commit to and put this into any type of let me give you some example. Do I marry him or not? There you go. In some person's life, this is how it might play out, because this Venus that holds the T square now, well, that Venus on one hand was in Leo once. That's where she got the offer, please marry me. But the very same Venus, going back 1 year, let's go back just 1 year in 2023, we had Venus retrograde. That relationship was severely put under the microscope and under that notorious Venus retrograde. This year, Venus is in the earthly sign of Virgo. All the wisdom and knowledge that you gained from that Venus retrograde now has to be applicable in any way, shape, and form. Do I marry him or not? Well, is he rich enough? Can he give me a stable life? Or is he sane enough? Let's look at his addictions, the nitty gritty. Everything that we must not judge in a person, but sometimes that one rare moment in life when we have to look at everything because the decision is so important. So we already see the Venusian element in this. Venus is uncomfortable in Virgo as it is. So Venus has to come up with the most uncomfortable answers to Jupiter's question in Gemini. Because Jupiter will, of course, ask Venus the principalistic element, right? What do you feel in principle? Venus will not answer directly. Venus will refer Jupiter to Saturn in Pisces through an opposition. Well, ask Saturn. Ask everything that happened to me in life, Pisces, right? Ask my past. That's the past's perspective, and then Jupiter has to put it into context. You see? So, and also Mars, whatever information we get out of this, it will be the fuel for a future or very close future action, a decision. Again, do I marry him? Do I sign the contract? Do I go for this new role or not? Do I leave my job or not? Do I pursue my hobby or not? What do I do with my life? Am I this or not? Do I get married or not? Do I have children or not? So all of these can be big, big things. This square will give one layer of understanding to this. In December, we will get a totally different one. But anyway, so this square means that our lives in a very practical way are going to be very, very busy. We are going to be, chances are, overwhelmed by our own thoughts, our own ideas, our own willingness to find the answers to the big questions, inner or outer, communications with family, friends, institutions, authorities. It is definitely going to be time for it. It's going to be time for travel. Also on this 19th, the moment the square perfect. But when I say 19th, consider the square part of our lives from, I don't know, 15th August onwards, the rest of August. That's it. It's a long-term energy. However, on this 19th, we have a full moon in Aquarius, T-squaring, you guessed it, Uranus, the ruler. So that's another T-square in the sky. That's another square that is gonna, okay. So we know that something is tensionate, and we know that collectively speaking, people are angry, but why? We'll see. I'm not gonna mention the full moon way too much here, because yeah. Then there is so much that we need to look at, not just the big picture, even personally speaking, because Venus in Virgo, the nitty-gritty, the small details count. Mercury retrograde wise, Mercury conjunct the sun, the Kazemi, right? Remember? The details actually matter very, very, very much, even to the heart. The details matter. So that's a complicated energy. This is not an easy brainstorming or decision-making process. What do I like? This is going to be quite complex. But if we want to complicate things, then let's make it a grand cross. Fortunately, the grand cross is so and so, because there is a trans-Neptunian object, Huya, at 20 degrees of Sagittarius. But that's not all that far from 17, right? Where Jupiter is, Saturn, and Venus to make the T-square. Trans-Neptunian object, this Huya, is named after a mythological rain god in South America. So this is rain connected to water. What does this rain symbolize to complicate things? Because we must remember, Sagittarius is the ruler of Jupiter, so Jupiter also opposes Huya. Does that mean too much water? Does that mean aviatic disaster due to rain or storm or thunderstorm? Why do I say that? Remember Uranus T-square full moon, that immediately means aviation. Uranus is conjunct Alicanto, a mythological bird, bird wings aviation. Uranus is connected to aviation technology. Jupiter is aviation. And Huya water, but opposing Jupiter, opposing Mars. Huya is actually opposing Mars very tightly. There is something in aviation. There is going to be definitely something in aviation. But that's not necessarily the theme of the T-square, because we're speaking about the big decision-making things. Huya in Sagittarius means, but it also needs to consult your belief system. You know what I mean? Your natural belief system. Because whatever choices, options you're making, well, if it's way too exotic and extreme for you, even if it's something you resonate with, if it's too extreme, you can't apply it. So this is how I see Huya in the equation. But let's get Huya out because there are other small objects to complicate things. One of the things is you can see this Venus square, Venus conjunct Orcus. What does Orcus is the anti-Pluto? It has to re-educate or restore that which is corrupted, where Pluto transforms it, it gives it a different meaning. Orcus either kills it, destroys it by into the abyss with you, into forgetting, or it fixes, repairs, retrains. Again, you see how Venus in the sign of Virgo, because of this Orcus, she really needs to get it right. What is worth it and what is the hair splitting. But besides Venus, Orcus, she is conjunct, I do believe here to the degree 17, with asteroid Astrea. Now, I find this so almost like the sky is screaming at us with the symbolism. Well, I know she's a tiny asteroid, just a little rock, but ironically, Astrea is the constellation of Virgo in mythology. She is the goddess of innocence, purity, justice, fairness, and innocence. And the legend goes that in the Iron Age, humanity became so wicked, filthy, corrupted morally that Astrea could no longer walk the same earth with us, and she ascended into the heavens, becoming the constellation of Virgo. She is in the sign of Virgo right now. I mean, the astrological sign of Virgo at 17 degrees conjunct Venus, which means she's very much part of the C square, opposing Saturn. Again, purity. What her symbolism says to me is that, oh, and one thing, the legend of Astrea also says that one day she will return to Earth to walk among us and bring on usher the golden age, because she is very symbolic of the old golden age, because she, when she walked the earth pre the Iron Age, so to speak, well, there was very much still, now I don't necessarily want to say the golden age, but from a Saturnian perspective, a strong balance and equilibrium, even here down on earth, where wickedness could not rule fully because it was challenged. But you can imagine in the context of the ancients, the heroes who slain dragons, demons, devils, and whatnot, wickedness couldn't triumph because heroes would always challenge it in that sense. So Astrea opposing Saturn. And also this is where Saturn in the Pisces, one type of morality, but what does Astrea represent? You can, as in, she would say to Saturn, don't come with religious principles and moralities drawn from religious rules and regulations, Saturn, right? Because that is not true pure. That is based on fear and dogmatism. Don't come with dogmatism. That's what Astrea says to Saturn. Saturn says to Astrea, well, absolutely, sweetie, but purity and innocence needs a form of protection. So don't come just with frequency, because that frequency also needs to be embodied. So you see how Saturn and Astrea trade off a certain energy where they reach balance. Now, at 19 degree of Virgo, there is asteroid Hecate. So this, I find this so interesting, because Hecate conjunct Venus, Hecate rules prophecy, foresight, and also she is the more mysterious aspect of the moon as a lunar deity. Crossroads, right? She rules crossroads. So this to me says uh, something value or love wise is at crossroads and you need to make a decision. But you foresaw this foresight, right? So Saturn now demands a correct attitude or the right way of going about things from you. Now, let's complicate this a tiny bit more, because at 15 degrees of Virgo, there is yet another asteroid, and this is named Photographica, named after photography, the art of photography. Now, something on this 19th of August will be either videoed or a photo or something captured. So something that is captured either on a media file, you know what I mean, is gonna hit the news big time. Personally speaking, photos. What does the photo capture? A moment of infidelity, or the answer lies in the phone, the photo folder. And last but not least, there are certain fixed stars at play. At 16, almost 70 degrees of Gemini, where Jupiter is, there is fixed star Rigel. That's good, because the improvisation part of the energy and to get solutions, that's Rigel. It helps. Resourcefulness, cleverness, figuring it out, that's Rigel. At 17 degrees of Sagittarius, there is a fixed star named Sabik. That's a very malevolent star, which amongst many other things rules when evil is successful. Thank God for Jupiter opposing it, and Mars. Well, actually, Mars is no longer opposing it. Jupiter opposing it, because it blocks out its effect. Yes, you might say, well, doesn't it actually expand its evil? That's another way of looking at it, of course, but remember the T-square? I hope Jupiter blocks out its effect, where evil is unsuccessful because it is discovered before it can be triumphant. And at 7 degrees of Gemini, there is also another asteroid named Phaeton. I'm not sure how you pronounce it in English, but this is from the Greek Phaeton. He was the sign of Helios, and he insisted on driving the sun chariot, even though he couldn't. His father told him he couldn't. It should have been very obvious to him that he couldn't, but he insisted, so he had to be led. But it went chaotic. It went really bad, and Zeus had to shoot him down and kill him. Otherwise, he would have disrupted the cosmic fabric. If so, there wasn't even time to tell him stop. He had to be put down. Tragic story, really. But what does this mean? Either in the context of an Aquarius full moon T-squaring Uranus, a weather phenomenon, an extreme weather phenomenon, disrupting something, disrupting the internet, solar flares, aurora borealis somewhere, or extreme heat or extreme frost somewhere. So the weather phenomenon disrupts travel. Again, aviation. There is going to be some aviation news. So this concludes the Jupiter and Saturn square. And finally, the Jupiter and Mars conjunction. I indirectly said so much about this. The time for action, the persuasive energy. In court of justice, things happen. Strong debate, strong words also personally. Communication, we go for it. We believe in our justice. We believe in our truth and we take action. And this is also where, not just for ourselves, but this Mars and Jupiter conjunction is really, really good to take action for another person, especially those who are helpless. So thank you so much for listening. And I really, really hope that this helped you. And again, it is going to be a very stressful and chaotic period. So let us be prepared. Live in the heart when the mind, because this is mutable energy. When the mind is overwhelmed, then we must live in the heart. So thank you, everyone. Until next time, bye for now.